The thief of souls. For millions of years, different civilizations have emerged on the face of the earth, and all of them have had something in common. The evil in their hearts, all for some reason disappeared, but something is still alive. It is not known if he is an angel or a demon. This creature that takes human form has existed alongside all civilizations, and every time one disappeared, it fell into a deep sleep for thousands of years until the next one was ready, with millions of inhabitants, and where evil multiplied day by day. This angel or demon liked to steal the souls of evil people, since they gave him strength and power to continue existing. And this time he has emerged from the darkness again. A strong earthquake shook the land where he slept and woke him up, and he could immediately feel in his heart the evil of the new civilization, which made him euphoric because he would once again begin to feed on the poor souls of evil people. The hospital in a small town hidden among the mountains. There was a hospital that harbored a dark secret. Doctors and nurses performed illegal abortions and committed unimaginable crimes. The townspeople lived in fear, but did not dare to speak. Everyone was afraid, the mayor and even the police, since it was believed that these people carried out diabolical rituals. But, one day, a mysterious man came to town. No one knew where he came from or what he was looking for, but there was something about him that caused chills. His presence was disturbing. His eyes seemed to see beyond what was visible. The man showed up at the hospital and asked to speak to the doctors and nurses. His voice was soft, but his words were threatening. He told them that he knew of their crimes and that he had come to punish them. The doctors and nurses laughed at him, thinking he was crazy. But what came next filled the doctors and nurses with horror. The mysterious man smiled and said, "I am not a man, I am a soul-stealing demon, and your souls belong to me." At that moment, the hospital was filled with overwhelming darkness. The man transformed into a demon, took out a mysterious gem, extended his hands, and the souls of the doctors and nurses began to be torn from their bodies. They screamed in terror, but it was too late. The gem trapped the souls of these damned. The demon took the souls of the doctors and nurses, leaving their bodies empty, dry, and their skin stuck to the bone, until they turned into dust and lying on the hospital floor. Then the soul thief disappeared as mysteriously as he had arrived. The town remained silent, terrified by what had happened. But they also felt a strange relief. The crimes at the hospital had been punished and the souls of the guilty had been taken away by the devil. From that day on, the hospital was abandoned and the town returned to normal. But no one forgot the mysterious man who they don't know if he was an angel or a demon who steals souls. And no one forgot the lesson they learned. Justice always finds its way, even in the darkest and darkest places. The harbor in the murky waters of a forgotten harbor, a grim-looking ship docked beneath the cover of night. This was no ordinary ship, but one tainted by the darkest crimes, human trafficking, weapons and drugs. The traffickers on board were unscrupulous men and women, whose souls were as black as the night that enveloped them. But that night, when the ship arrived at the port, a mysterious figure was waiting for them at the dock. He was a tall, thin man, dressed in a black cloak that seemed to absorb the light around him. His eyes shone with unearthly fire and a cruel smile spread across his face. The man approached the ship and with a voice that resounded like thunder declared, "I am not a man, but a demon who steals souls. I have come to punish them for their crimes and their souls belong to me." The traffickers laughed at him, believing him to be just a madman. But the demon stretched out his hand toward them, and suddenly their laughter turned into screams of terror. One by one, their souls were torn from their bodies and absorbed by the demon, leaving only a few bodies lying on the dock. The port fell silent, only interrupted by the sound of waves crashing against the dock. The trafficker's ship was now empty, its occupants had been taken by the demon. Since that day it is said that every time a ship full of criminals arrives at that forgotten port, the devil appears to take their souls. And although many consider this just a legend, traffickers know it as a warning.
Yeah.
No crime goes unpunished even in the darkest waters. The Black Horse in a remote mining town, a terrifying legend was passed down from generation to generation. It was said that a black horse galloped through the deserted streets at midnight, carrying the devil on its back. This evil spirit took the souls of those who carelessly went out at that time during All Souls' Day. The Black Horse was an imposing creature, with eyes that glowed like burning embers and hooves that hit the ground with a metallic sound. The demon, for its part, was a dark and menacing figure, shrouded in shadows and with a chilling laugh that echoed through the night. The townspeople lived in fear, making sure they were safe in their homes before midnight. However, there were always some who, out of curiosity or recklessness, ventured outside after dark. One All Souls' Day night, a young miner decided to challenge a legend. The miner was a young man with a bad life, who had fun hurting others. It is said that he had committed many crimes and used to terrorize the townspeople, but one night, armed with only his courage and an oil lamp, he went out into the street just as the clock struck midnight. He wanted to show everyone that they were cowards, and that the legend was false. Suddenly, the sound of hooves hitting the ground filled the air and a cold wind blew through the street. The young miner turned to see the black horse galloping towards him, with the demon riding on its back. The demon extended his hand towards the young miner and an invisible force dragged him towards him. The young man tried to resist, but it was useless. His soul was torn from his body and absorbed by the demon. The black horse and the demon disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, leaving the young miner lifeless in the street, while a loud laugh could be heard, and he could be heard saying in a terrifying voice, "You are mine. I have you. I am the thief of souls, and your soul belongs to me." Since then, no one else in the town dared to challenge the legend of the black horse and the demon. The story of the black horse and the demon became a warning for all the inhabitants of the mining town. They always remembered to respect traditions and fear the dark forces that lurked in the night of All Souls' Day. The spell. It was a sinister and stormy night. The wind blew through the bare trees, making the branches creak and clatter together. In the middle of this desolate forest stood an old mansion, so old that it seemed to be part of the landscape itself. The mansion had been abandoned for years, but that night a light flickered in one of the upstairs windows. Inside the mansion, the air was charged with electricity, as if it knew something was about to happen. In the center of the lighted room stood a lone figure. He was a middle-aged man, with a face marked by years of intense study. In front of him was an ancient leather book, open to a page that displayed a strange symbol. The man raised his hand and began to recite words in a strange language. As his voice filled the room, the symbol on the book began to glow with an unearthly light. The man continued his recitation, his voice echoing in the empty room. As the words left his mouth, the symbol on the book glowed brighter and brighter, illuminating the room with an ethereal light. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the room, blowing out the candles and leaving the room in darkness. The man stopped, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, in the darkness, he heard a sound, a soft, hissing whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The man struck a match, his hand trembling as the light from the flame danced on the walls. He looked around, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. However, the whisper continued, growing in volume until it filled the room. Then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared in front of him. It was a nightmarish creature, with eyes that glowed in the dark and razor-sharp claws. The man backed away, but the creature advanced, its face twisted into an evil smile. The man knew he had made a mistake. He had summoned something he couldn't control, but he wasn't going to give up without a fight. He lifted the book, his voice echoing through the room as he began to recite another incantation. The man began to recite the incantation, his voice trembled but remained firm. The words filled the room, forming a barrier between him and the creature. The creature roared, its claws clawing at the air as it tried to reach the man. But the spell was working. The creature began to retreat, its form fading with each word the man spoke. Finally, with one last roar of frustration, the creature disappeared, leaving only the man in the room. The man dropped the book, his body shaking with relief and exhaustion. He had survived, but at a cost. He knew he had played with forces he didn't fully understand, and he had paid the price. From that night on, the man swore never to open the book again, but despite his promise, every time he passed by the room, he could hear the soft, sibilant whisper of the creature in the wind, which constantly reminded him of the night he summoned a monster from his nightmares.
Yes.
The man lived the rest of his days with the memory of that night. Although he had survived, the experience had changed him. He was no longer the same man he had once been, full of curiosity and desire for knowledge. Now he was a man marked by fear and caution. Despite his promise, the man could not resist the temptation of opening the book again. Every night he sat in the same room, the book in his hands, fighting the urge to open it. But each night, the creature's whisper on the wind grew louder, and the temptation became harder to resist. One night, the man finally gave in. He opened the book, his eyes scanning the pages until he found the symbol that had summoned the creature. He began to recite the incantation, his voice trembling but remaining firm. But this time, something was different. In the creature's place, a different figure appeared. It was a woman, a ghostly but beautiful figure, with a soft light emanating from her. The man was shocked, unable to believe what he saw. The woman smiled and extended her hand towards him. "Don't be afraid," he said. His voice was like a melody. "I have come to help you." From that night on, the man no longer feared the book or the creature he had summoned. With the woman's help, he learned to control the powers of the book and use them for good. Although the experience had been terrifying, in the end it had taught him a valuable lesson. You shouldn't play with things you don't know well. Friends of the channel, I hope you liked this series of short stories. I cordially invite you to subscribe to my channel, share and comment. Don't forget to activate the bell for a future video. I would appreciate it if you liked the video, since it helps me a lot. Thank you very much and see you soon.